Yoko, you smartass! Stop making sense, genius of a game dev or we'll be sorry. So, NieR Replicant wasn't a game I was expected to be remade, or rather in Yoko Taro's words, given a version upgrade. This game features re-recorded voice lines, reimagined environments, polished game mechanics, and a re-recording of the original score. Despite some technical hiccups that can be tweaked a bit on the PC, this version seems to perform better than Automata's did on Steam, at least for now. Oh, but how could I be so rude? I forgot to properly call this game with its official title. NieR Replicant version 1.22474487139. Spoiler alerts, by the way. We all know PC ports is just a wild card of fun and technical hurdles. This game almost gave me an instant of disappointment when it started to freeze and what I assumed was crashing. However, after scouring through the ever so helpful Steam reviews and discussions, I actually got the game to perform well. So what was the culprit of the game running at 1 FPS? Yeah, that's right, 1 frame per second. Well, the answer was how the game reacts to an external peripheral like a wired control. And that's what made me think that the game had crashed. But no, it still ran. At 1 FPS. Weird. Kinda reminded me of how some PC ports of Capcom games didn't run because of some Wacom drivers that interfered with them. But that's where most of the technical problems stop. Throughout the game, I get roughly a stable frame rate, despite some dips to around 55 FPS. Actually, I lied. The game can still dip towards 24 FPS, heck, maybe even lower. I'm not 100% sure why this happens, although I would speculate that the game still struggles to render new areas along with a lot of enemies in heavy combat. That's pretty typical with many games, so I can understand the struggles. Or it could be because it was being hindered by my recording software. Not sure if Nvidia's Shadowplay made things kinda slow. Like, look here. Here's some instances of the frame rate dipping pretty low. So low that I had to pause the game to let it recover. I think this happened like 3 or 4 times throughout my entire playthrough. So the story isn't a huge thing that grasps me entirely. Heck, even the lore as a whole for the NieR series, including Drakengard, the previous series that ushered in the NieR series, is convoluted and twisted that almost anything can be considered canon. Yoko Taro is a unique individual with outlandish ideas, so I guess it makes sense when the story isn't clear. I mentioned earlier that this is a remake, or a version upgrade, of the original game that came out in 2010 called NieR Gestalt. Well, that's what the West only got. Japan, however, had both versions, Gestalt and Replicant, and were on Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 respectively. Why the two different games? Not sure why for Japan, but for the US and the rest of the West, it was due to believing that the story would make more sense with the father as a protagonist, and the father version of the game is called NieR Gestalt. So, in Gestalt, you play as a father taking care of his ill daughter, Yona, stricken with a deadly disease called the Black Scrawl, which has no cure. He set out in hopes to find a cure, and eventually leading to befriend an ancient tome of higher knowledge named Grimoire Vice that accompanies you on your journey along with a half-human, half-shade individual named Kaine, and a kid that was used to become a powerful weapon, Emile. You battle along shades that impede the security of everyday life in this distraught post-apocalyptic world. Eventually, the strange but very familiar being known as the Shadow Lord comes in and wreaks havoc among the citizens of Papa NieR's village and takes Yona. A time skip of 5 years occurs and you figure out how to get Yona back from the Shadow Lord, to which you start to see the true meaning of your actions and what the inhabitants of the world are really like. So for Replicant, it's the same premise, except you play as a brother and Yona is your sister. The main protagonist is never given an actual name aside from what you give him at the start of your playthrough. You don't really know who the parents are, but it might be speculated that Papa NieR from Gestalt is canonically the father across all games. Don't quote me on that. I forgot to mention that the game opens up with brother NieR and Yona struggling to survive in a city in the middle of the summer as it snows. I believe it's around 2005X or something like that. But when that sequence ends, the game progresses to about 1300 years later. It ties into the joke ending of Drakengard 1, where the death of dragons caused some sort of ice age in the world, thus giving us this post-apocalyptic setting. So back to the plot. You get to be told that humanity had their souls stripped away from their bodies long ago, and the shades you have to battle are kind of like lost souls trying to reclaim the body to live in. The story is depressing, but not in a super negative way. And it's not always blunt about it. You notice how some main and side quests lead you to a death of someone unexpectedly, people being lied and deceived to for years, and chances of running into no hope for better times, and etc. It's sad, but it's kind of a reflection of our own normal lives. Everything isn't always sunshine and rainbows. Instead, life can be ass and full of shit. Ah yes, the music. The ultimate feature that got me hooked into the series. Hands down, the soundtrack has to be one of my most favorite of all video games. The music felt so dynamic and feeling and even fitting to most of the locations you go. Some of my most favorite songs is played in the Northern Plains, the Junk Heap, and other special songs that would play in certain moments of the main storyline, such as Kanye's Sacrifice or Emil's Sacrifice. But compared to the original, I think the 2010 release had the music done better. It set the tone just about right, whereas Replicant's version wasn't 100% there all the time. Like, listen to Hills of Radiant Winds, aka the Northern Plains music from this one.
You can
And now the original. I enjoyed the original due to it being dynamic enough and made you actually feel you were sprawling around an open area to discover. However, for the Junk Heap music, I think Replicant nailed it better than the original. I'm mixed on the music, but in no way dissatisfied with the outcome. Hell, I could go on for a while talking about the music of the game, but I'm trying to stick to a simple review here. Some of you guys that never played the original ought to be happy how much better the combat is in Replicant. I was praying for the devs to adopt the combat that Automata has since the original felt severely outdated. There was no enemy auto-locking feature in Gestalt. Most of the times you'd be swinging at nothing because you'd have to manually face your enemies. Aiming your Dark Lance magic was so horrible. You had to manually aim your crosshairs to what you want to hit. Like, look at this. Dark Blast shot out slower projectiles and it felt like Dark Gluttony didn't do that much as in Replicant. It wasn't as bad as it sounded, but I believe this was a big reason what made people back then drop the game. Hell, I remember grabbing Gestalt from a local GameStop, and the GameStop clerk advised me not to buy the game since he believed the game was bad due to the poor combat. Imagine that. Hi there, I'd like to purchase this obscure Japanese RPG game from you. Are you sure you want to buy this game? It's pretty bad, dude. Trust me, I played it. It sucks. I work for GameStop. I know what I'm talking about. Yeah, but that's your opinion and I already made up my mind on getting this game. Nah man, trust me. Let me recommend you something better. Here, you should get this generic watered down soulless FPS game. Alright, so that was almost a true story, except he was actually trying to get me to buy Final Fantasy 13 instead. Not that it's generic and soulless. I just didn't have enough money to that game and I didn't have my mind set to it, and plus I'm like severely behind on all things Final Fantasy. Sag. So anyways, gameplay is kind of the same as the original. Picking up items much faster though, you can run more quicker. During the move into the second half of the game, enemies obviously get stronger, but that wasn't a huge problem with the original version. As a matter of fact, with Replicant, the game makes it feel as if it's actually difficult as you approach the halfway point. I'm not sure if ToyLogic balanced the combat out because I remember plowing my enemies down pretty easily in Gestalt. This time around, Shades are now mainly equipped with armor and come in larger bunches with a magic spewing comrade or two for support. One of the biggest things that bewildered me was how much harder it was to break an enemy's guard. Gestalt made it pretty easy to break an enemy's shield, and to go for easy kills on what would have been sort of a useless upgrade for them. It made me for a bit believe that Papa NieR in Gestalt was massively overpowered. By the way, I played these two games on normal difficulty. Using the spear in Gestalt was an easy go-to weapon in the second half, since it had a superior guard break and was pretty fast and heavy hitting with regular attacks. I genuinely believe that the devs balanced out the game to make it not feel that the player is overpowered. So if you're looking for a tip on how to get stronger weapons, the best advice I can give you is to do the side quest to earn extra money. Use the spears and level them up as much as you can. Doing so will make guard breaking easier and grinding enemies faster and maybe even enjoyable. Take a look at how crazy I can shred these enemies with this spear at level 3. It does almost 700 damage. I think on my first playthrough of Gestalt, I relied on the B-Sword longsword with minimal upgrades, and yet I still remember guard breaking armored enemies with ease. Hell, maybe if you get the sword from the King of Facade after completing one of his later quests, you can upgrade it for about 800 damage.
Trees full of birds.
This game is in no doubt a pass on my books. It looks beautiful, it plays nice and fluidly, and it's always a blast to come back and keep playing. The main cast are unforgettable, and the music still strikes strong as it did when I first experienced the original game. Replicant as a remake reminds me of how great and faithful dev studios can be with upgrading their older games for modern day usage. It's just like how Purple Lamp Studios did with SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom. It practically stayed true to this original while definitely added more in balancing out gameplay that it is on par with current day standards. Technical issues always exist, and it's great seeing more and more Japanese devs starting to understand the PC market and seeing a demand in Japanese RPGs there. Combat is fluid, gameplay is much less clunky, and Replicant feels like an actual modern game. But the story and the mood makes you realize how grim and depressing the world you live in is. A harsh reality that some may feel might be too real for one to take. That's why I'm giving this game an 8.1 out of 10. Here's to hoping that ToyLogic officially adds Papa NieR into the main game.
In prison.